All right, let's set the stage. It's 1969. That's the year ARPANET was created. The first real attempt to connect computers in different locations over a network. It's like the digital equivalent of drawing lines between tin cans and saying, like, hey, let's try to talk.
Exactly. ARPANET was revolutionary for its time. It gave us the foundation for what we now call networking. But here's what's interesting. It wasn't initially designed to be the internet as we know it. It was more of a way for academics and researchers to share data, like an early prototype of teamwork in our now globalized digital labs.
Right. But fast forward a couple of decades to 1989, and that's where Tim Berners-Lee steps in at CERN. This guy wasn't just building connections. He was building a system for organizing them, giving them meaning. That proposal he wrote, information management, a proposal, it's what birthed the World Wide Web.
And man, that proposal laid the groundwork for three core technologies we still use today: HTML for structuring content, HTTP for transferring it, and URLs to locate it. It's insane to think how these now feel ubiquitous, like oxygen for the web. But back then, it was essentially uncharted territory.
Tim didn't stop there, though. Like, 1990 rolls around, and he works up the first ever web browser and server using a Next computer. If you think about it, this wasn't just one small technical step. It was like carving the blueprint for the first digital library where anyone could walk in.
And on that Next machine, here's a detail I love. He hosted the first website. Simple text, hyperlinks, no fancy graphics, but it was the start of something monumental. That site explained what the web was and how to use it. It opened the door for others to contribute their own pieces, like a digital tapestry.
What's more important is what Berners-Lee decided not to do. He could have locked this whole system up with patents or royalties, but instead he gave it away. He wanted the web to be free and accessible to everyone, a philosophy that honestly feels rare now when you think about paywalls and proprietary ecosystems.
Absolutely. It's a testament to how forward-thinking he was. By making the web open, he essentially ensured its growth. I mean, had it been locked behind IP rights, we might be looking at a very different and fragmented digital world today.
And I think that's worth reflecting on. Like, Berners-Lee wasn't just an inventor, he was an enabler. The web wouldn't be what it is without his vision for collaboration and accessibility. It's easy to forget that when we're scrolling through endless TikToks or binge watching Netflix.
Exactly. And it's funny to look back at those early attempts, like those basic HTML experiments we all built when we first touched web design. It makes you wonder if Berners-Lee imagined how far it would go.
Building on Berners-Lee's vision of an open web, it didn't take long for its potential to expand far beyond academics and hobbyists. By the 1990s, we were seeing the web's adolescence and one of my favorite shifts, commercialization. Platforms like Amazon and eBay started rewiring how we think about shopping. Remember those days when online anything seemed almost experimental?
Oh, absolutely. Amazon was just a bookstore at the start, but it showed us how the web could reshape commerce. You've got one-click buying, user reviews. It wasn't just convenience, it was personalized. Then eBay brought this auction-style marketplace where anyone could sell. It wasn't just companies selling to customers, it was customers selling to customers. A huge shift for back then.
And that idea, users shaping the experience, that was revolutionary. But let's not forget, a key enabler of this was the evolution of web browsers. From the first World Wide Web to browsers like Netscape and later Internet Explorer, those tools were essentially the gateway to this new digital ecosystem.
Exactly. And each browser brought its own wave of innovation. Like Netscape had that clear push towards usability for the masses. And fast forward through the 2000s, we see giants like Chrome and Firefox shaping today's look and feel of the web, focusing on speed, plugins, security, you name it.
Right. And what followed came naturally, the rise of social media platforms. Back in the mid-2000s, we had MySpace, Facebook, and eventually Twitter. For better or worse, these platforms shifted the center of gravity for how we communicate online. People weren't just consuming content anymore. They were creating conversations around it.
Totally. And the concept of community building really exploded. I mean, before that, the web felt transactional. But with social media, everyone had a stage. You could be heard, connect, even organize movements. It's ironic how these tools started simple, but now influence elections and global conversations.
Yeah, no doubt. And while this was happening in communication, personalization crept into every corner. Think Netflix in the late 2000s giving us recommendations before that was even a thing, or how e-commerce platforms suddenly started knowing exactly what you needed before you did.
That's the true essence of going from Web 1.0 to today's Web 2.0. Static web pages were great for information, but personalized, algorithm-driven experiences, those tapped into data and behavior to predict what you wanted, like an AI-tailored concierge. That's when algorithms became the secret force shaping our day-to-day lives.
It's fascinating. Seeing how far we've come, all rooted in those first iterations when eBay was selling Beanie Babies or Facebook started as a college social network. What's consistent is how these innovations turned simple ideas into transformative industries.
And it's always worth noting how these companies evolved with the web itself. Amazon, for instance, is now an ecosystem, not just a store. It's an evolution across platforms. They didn't just adapt to the web. In many cases, they've shaped what the web has become.
And speaking of companies shaping the web and users starting to play active roles, Dave, it's time we talk about the next big step, Web 3.0. At its core, it's decentralization, putting control back in the hands of users rather than corporations. It's a bold reimagining of the internet structure.
Totally. And, decentralization isn't just some tech buzzword. It's this fundamental shift powered by blockchain technologies. Blockchain introduces this layer of trust by design, where data isn't just sitting in one centralized server, but distributed across many nodes. Think of it like digital democracy for your data.
Right, and it's not just about trust. There's a big focus on autonomy. Imagine not needing to hand over your personal info to use a service. Instead, you own your identity online, and you decide who gets access to what, when, and why. That's huge.
But here's the catch. It's not all rainbows and decentralized unicorns. With this newfound autonomy comes some pretty significant hurdles around privacy and security. Take GDPR, for example. It was a landmark for privacy rights globally, but it also showed how hard it is to actually implement that kind of ethical use of personal data, especially on a global scale where regulations vary so much.
Exactly. And that challenge only gets amplified as we move into Web 4.0, where technologies like AI, 5G, and immersive platforms are creating these hyper-connected, intelligent ecosystems. Think seamless integrations. Your smart fridge talks to your grocery app, which then syncs with your calendar to remind you when the milk's about to expire.
I love that vision of seamless interactions, but I think there's also a need to focus on human-centric design here. Imagine these ecosystems built to enhance your day, not overwhelm it. It's why concepts like user experience and accessibility are becoming just as critical as the tech itself. You can have the fastest 5G connection, but if the interface is clunky or unapproachable, what's the point?
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they didn't stop to think if they should.
I understood that reference.
Speaking of dystopian 90s films becoming a reality, AI, for instance, it's not just about algorithms suggesting your next Netflix binge anymore. We're talking about AI embedded into these ecosystems to anticipate needs across every facet of your life, for better or for worse. It's the kind of innovation that could make or break how we trust these digital infrastructures.
Exactly. And I think part of the promise of Web 4.0 is creating technology that essentially fades into the background, where it feels intuitive and almost invisible. But, achieving that level of sophistication brings immense pressure to get data security right. With everything so interconnected, a single breach could ripple through an entire system.
And that brings us back full circle to the ethics of all of this. From blockchain's decentralized philosophies to the human-centric approaches in Web 4.0, every layer needs solid foundations of trust, security, and accessibility. Otherwise, we're not building a better internet, we're just building another version of the same problems.
And honestly, that's what makes this such an exciting time. It's this constant balancing act between pushing boundaries and staying grounded in what really matters, creating a web that serves people, not profits. It's fascinating to think about where we're headed.
So, after digging into the exciting possibilities of Web 4.0 and the challenges of trust and ethics, it feels fitting to explore how these ideas are shaping up in real-world applications.
Absolutely. From the early days of ARPANET to the expansive visions of Web 4.0, it's amazing to see how far we've come and how much further we still have to go.
No kidding. And what's exciting is that like every step from creating basic connections to crafting like personalized immersive web experiences has built this digital world we're living in. Like it's honestly wild to think about how much of it was grounded in Tim Berners-Lee's dream of open collaboration.
And that openness, it's a reminder of why innovation thrives when we share, not lock away possibilities. What a legacy to have built.
Totally. And speaking of moving forward, next week we'll be digging into one of the biggest leaps in internet history, transitioning from dial-up to broadband. Remember those screeching modem sounds? We're diving into how those connections revolutionized our online lives.
Definitely can't wait to unpack that one. Broadband wasn't just faster, it changed the way we thought about the internet altogether.
Before we sign off, we've got something for you. If you're looking for smarter digital solutions or ways to level up your web presence, head over to modularity.us. You can schedule a free consultation and let us help you solve your digital needs. It might just be the next step in your tech evolution.
Seriously? Reach out. The digital world's growing fast, and it's always better to have a strategy in place. Let us help you get there.
That's it for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time as we dial up a simpler time and how it evolved to broadband connections. Until then, take care and keep pushing those digital boundaries.
See you next time, everyone.